Good morning, everyone. Let's not waste any time. This is the Fuji 16mm F1.4 review. Let's get it started. Welcome back, everyone, and before I get started, if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing to the channel. I don't think you'll be disappointed. If you're into camera gear, specifically a lot of Fuji gear, if you're into photography techniques, how I retouch my images, and seeing a lot of images in reviews, and especially, making a review around a certain photo shoot, not really just showing random shots around the house and that kind of stuff. That's what this channel is about. I really do take the time and effort to bring you insights, but also bring you behind the scenes. You'll see more of that in the future as well. So please do consider subscribing to the channel. It does make a difference. Now, the second thing I want to say is that I talked about the 16mm F1.4 as one of my top 3 lenses. If you haven't already, be sure to check it out after this video. I talk about why I choose this as one of my top 3. I'll echo some of the same things, but this is more of a review. So if you're looking for a more in-depth perspective, you're definitely in the right spot. So 16mm F1.4 on a Fuji system, on their X-mount APS-C system, you're looking at the equivalent of 24 millimeters. As you can see here, it is a hefty lens. It is not similar to their Fuji crons, as people call it, those F2 and 16mm F2.8 lens. No, this one is definitely a beefier lens. This is billed as one of their premium lenses. But why? Why is it one of their premium pieces of glass? And why are so many people in love with it? I'm gonna tell you why. Well, first, it's about $1,000 US to get this lens, about $1,300 Canadian. And for that, well, Fuji didn't skimp on quality. This thing has some weight to it. It is hefty. It weighs about 375 grams, heavier than a lot of Fuji lenses. But comparatively speaking to something that's in a full frame lineup, it's incredibly portable, it's incredibly competitive when you compare it against some of the other 16mm F1.4 lenses on the market, especially on the full frame side. You also have this manual clutch focus that's built into this lens to quickly switch into manual focusing. So if your Fuji camera is in single or continuous focus, and you don't necessarily want to always be in manual focus, this is a cool feature where just with one click, you can quickly go to manual focus, grab the shot you need to, and then go back to your single or continuous focus. That's actually really cool about this lens. You have the aperture dial. It's a little loose for my liking. It's very easy to knock this or nudge this and all of a sudden shift out of f5.6 or f4. But you, like many Fuji lenses, you do have that aperture ring as well. Now, even though I may have knocked this clutch by accident a couple of times, if I had to choose, I would prefer having a manual focus clutch on my lenses, especially ones that have a limited throw. And as you can see from the footage here, this one rotates about 120 degrees, something like that. So you just know where your focusing distance is gonna be. If you're all the way at infinity and someone's quickly in front of you, you can start to get really good at guessing how much you need to rotate that lens to grab focus and ultimately be faster with manual focus. It's a premium feature and it exists for a reason, and people that use it value it incredibly, and people that maybe aren't apparent to it, I'd say try it out and see if you do like it, because you can become a little bit more comfortable with manual focus. You can get really good really quickly and even surprise yourself when you can start guessing focusing distances in the moment. This 24mm focal length is wider than what your eyes are accustomed to, so you're gonna get more of that environment. If you're into landscape photography, if you're into more expanded street photography, environmental street photography, or creating unique portraits, something that it is challenging because you don't want to distort people, but just to add more length, more distance, and gravitate the eyes in a certain direction, this can be an incredibly powerful lens. And being able to open up the aperture f1.4, having that extra stop or couple of stops of light becomes incredibly valuable in low light situations, but also in video situations. Now, while the autofocus, and I'll talk about it in detail, isn't the greatest compared to other Fuji lenses, when you're in manual focus and capturing video, this can be a really special product to use, something that creates these creamy backgrounds. and provides this unique perspective. Almost in some cases, depending on what you're shooting, this awe-inspiring perspective, really wide and encompasses and envelops the viewer and really showcases that environment. Something that's really special. And I like the fact that you can open up that aperture to 1.4. It's something that, not a lot of lenses can do and do really well. This one does. You still get that fantastic sharpness with that f1.4. Now, while you can shoot at f1.4, I will say that not everything needs to be shot at f1.4. Things get really special when you start to go to f4 and not 1.4, f4 and north of that. The sharpness on this thing. There's these two extra low dispersion elements. And listen, I'm not gonna get into the technical reason or the engineering reason why. Quite simply, the tech that's built into this lens results in sharper images, less chromatic aberration, less ghosting in your images, and less flaring in your images. So when you're in that f4 range especially, you're getting these corner-to-corner sharp images that look really great. And quite simply, fantastic tech that you can rely on regardless of what your subject may be. Fujifilm set out to make the best prime lens they could optically for the APS-C, and they pretty much did. You get to enjoy these crisp shots that practically crackle when you look at them. While a wider focal length can be challenging, I actually find it rewarding, especially for environmental portraiture. You're constantly battling the risk of distorting your subject in unnatural ways, but if you reframe and try to wield the lens, you can extract some truly amazing shots. This lens has autofocus, I will say that. It definitely isn't the fastest on the market for Fuji cameras, but it isn't the slowest either. If you're looking at speed, you can expect something that sits in between the 56.1.2 and the 23 f2. Somewhere in between there, that's where the focusing speed of this lens operates. For my use, it works really well for single point autofocus on stationary subjects. Dynamic subjects, and especially when you're in continuous AF, it can prove to be a bit tricky, especially if you're using it on cameras that are older than the Fuji X-T3. Cameras that don't have that phase detect autofocus that the X-T3 series ushered in. Despite that though, being able to go as close as 6 inches to grab focus, that's something I really like about this lens. So you can really get close to your subject. And if you're so daring in street photography, grab some really interesting shots. You can start layering in and use that distortion to your advantage and really push your creativity. Now the question is, why would you pick the 16mm f1.4 over the 16mm f2.8? Let me try to answer that for you. If you're serious about landscape photography and travel photography, to the point that you print your work, you want to sell your work, or maybe that is your work, I would highly suggest adding this lens to your collection. You get this focal length that isn't garishly too wide and distorts your image, but you also get some of the best optics that Fuji can produce. And when you're in that field and your work relies on it, or you've spent thousands and thousands of dollars to get to your destination, having something like this can be almost worth its weight in gold in that moment. Now, if you're a wedding photographer or portrait photographer, there's even an argument to be made to add this lens to your kit. Again, premium optics, extra stop or even stops of light capturing ability. It can be something that's incredibly valuable to the work that you're doing. It might not be the first lens or even the second lens that you add to your kit, but having this focal length and this perspective can lead to some really unique shots for your client, and something that might be rewarding for your own creativity as well. Being able to have this wide focal length, layer in things, it's something that works really well in portrait and wedding photography. Now, that being said, don't count out the 16mm f2.8 lens. I did a review on this, and this thing is a tiny and mighty beast. While you don't get the extra stop of light, and you might not get the greatest optics, it is much faster at focusing, much better for video, especially vlogging work. Maybe not professional video, but for vlogging and in-the-moment video work, YouTubing, that kind of stuff. And when you're in the 5 and 5.6 range, it is incredibly sharp, and I would challenge people to look at images from both lenses side by side and tell me the difference. There's a reason I own both of these lenses. They serve different needs. And I think the 16 2.8 lens still has a much wider audience than the f1.4 lens. For me, I find the 16-2.8 more fun to use for street photography, relying on eye detect autofocus, and that lens produces much more hits than misses compared to this lens. And for that reason, especially with the size and weight, I actually like that for street photography in good lighting conditions. If I can end it off on this, if you're serious about your photography, even if you're not getting paid for it, but it's something that's near and dear to you and you are inching and clawing your way to get better, to push yourself, investing in a 16mm f1.4 lens can be seen as investing in yourself. It'll challenge you. It's something that you have to learn to wield, but it will push your creativity. If you force yourself to this perspective, you can really surprise yourself in the results, but also differentiate your work. And for that reason, I think it's, it's definitely one of my top 3 lenses, but I think it might even be in the top 3 for a lot of you that are watching. Again, it's a 24mm equivalent. If you don't like this perspective, if it's too wide for you, well, I can't answer that for you. That's ultimately your personal preference. But if you're prepared, if you're comfortable, or even if you're just curious and you want to play in this focal range, I have to say, this is one of the most satisfying, rewarding lenses on the market. Not just for Fuji, period. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think about the 16mm f1.4 lens. Do you have it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you want to get it? Or do you don't care for it at all? Let me know. I respond to all of your comments. Thank you so much again. My name's Gajan, and I'll see you next time.